Alright, so today I'm going to talk to you guys about getting out of auto, and that can be interpreted as two different things. It's either getting out of auto, the mode on your camera, all the dials that are a bit confusing, or out of the auto mindset of, okay, I'm just going to snap a quick photo and then looking at it later and going, oh wow, that was crap, why didn't I record that better? So, just want to start it off by saying you're not just going to pick up a camera and suddenly work for National Geographic. As you can tell, that is Mitre Peak in Milford Sound. I don't know how that's not obvious to everyone else. This is a photo that I took in 2008 on a 3-month trip to New Zealand where I took 3 months of fairly average photos because I had no idea what I was doing. And this was actually the photo that spurred me to want to take more photos and learn what I was doing, because actually that's the moon, these are beautiful stars, there's a reflection down there, none of that's actually visible. So my goal is eventually to get back there and take this shot, but take a real shot, take one that I can put into a presentation and say, how cool is this? Once you learn the basics, could work for National Geographic. This is actually a photo that I had featured in National Geographic a couple years ago. So I actually took this photo in 2011 and I started seriously taking photos in 2009. So it took a couple years of learning, lots of misses, more than hits, but you know, it can happen. So having a good camera with all its fancy settings doesn't make you a good photographer. There's so many people that say, what gear do you shoot with? Oh, that's such a good camera. And I'm like, oh, you cooked such a great pie. What sort of oven do you have? So it's a bit like that sometimes, but you should know that it's not just understanding your camera. It's not just knowing how to use a big fancy one. If you've got a little camera, you can take some amazing photos too. So rather than going through some settings to begin with, I'm going to go through the general mindset of photography. So there's a few basic rules that a lot of photographers follow. There are times where a lot of these rules are broken, but it's good to, when you're learning, to start going through these and trying to apply them to your photos just to see what a difference it makes. So this is a photo of Wanaka in New Zealand. As you can tell, it does follow the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is that you put everything on a line a third of the way through the image. So you have the box that goes down those lines. So you never have a subject that you put straight in the center of the photo, because the eye doesn't tend to look there. The eye always wants to look for something on these lines. Can't explain to you why, but that's just how it works. And the other thing is that you want to make sure that your photo has balance, that you're not telling somebody to look at a photo where there's no specific focal point, like this one. Why isn't it working? Okay, so if you compare this shot with this shot, you see that here the water is exactly the same height as the sky. You don't know what the photographer was trying to get you to look at. They weren't necessarily trying to get you to look at the water, they weren't necessarily focusing on the sky. Whereas here, you know that I was focusing on the sky. And while there is water, while there is a reflection, what I really wanted you to look at was the sky. So if you just try that in some of your photos, if you look at a horizon line and go, okay, I need to just make sure I move that up or down, and then look at your photos afterwards, you'll notice that automatically there is a difference aesthetically. So this is another one. There's this one versus that one. That one is not quite rule of thirds, it's slightly in between the third line down here and the halfway mark. But I still find that I like this photo better because I've got a bit more of the sky, I've got something that I'm trying to point the viewer to. So another rule is keeping it simple. So a lot of the time you get to a place and you go, how amazing is this? Look at this beautiful landscape that stretches in every direction, and you try to capture all of it. That's not necessarily the best idea, because while it does look cool to you visually, it doesn't always show up in the camera that way. You don't look at it later and go, oh yeah, look at that. You go, oh, look at all that junk on the side, and there was a broken down car over there that I could have cut out. So if you keep it simple, it helps to focus the photo. It gives the photo a bit more meaning. This shot I actually took with a telephoto lens, so a zoom lens, from my holiday home in Texco, and I could have taken the entire mountain range that's over here, and there's a lake over here, but I focused in because I found the clouds interesting. And I find this to be a lot more interesting in photo than if I'd gotten all of the rest of it, because then I wouldn't know where to look. And that's a big thing in photography, is people need to know where to look. So you also want to have a foreground. So a lot of photos suffer from the fact that you have a photo, you've got a beautiful reflection, but you've got nothing else. Hi, Lisa. Okay. It's fine. You don't have to look so scared. So rather than in this photo, I could have walked over here and I could have taken a straight shot out across the water, but I wanted to have something else in the photo. I wanted to have a foreground that brings your interest into the photo, because as you can see, this actually will take you out and your eyes kind of drawn in towards, that's actually the moon. So if you have an element like that, then it helps the viewer to kind of focus into the photo. So those are just a few rules that can, if you just think about it a little bit. My mother, I did not harass her about it at all, but by the end of our New Zealand trip, she went, Kristin, you've ruined me. Because I just took that photo and I went, no, I don't like that, I need to go take it again, because the horizon's in the middle. And I never told her that, but she picked that up from looking at my photos daily. So, going back to my National Geographic photo, which of the rules do you think that I used in that photo?
Rule 3.
Yep. Yeah, so the horizon line is a bit above the center.
Got something in the foreground.
Yep, yeah, so I've got a foreground focus. That one actually gets a lot of people. They look at it and they go, wow, do you feel like Chinese lanterns out there? They're actually pylons that were lit up by a pier behind me. Yeah, so, and the other thing that I could apply, the other rule too, is I didn't try to capture the whole bridge. The bridge actually continues quite a way along here, but it was just, it didn't look right, so I didn't cut it off. So, because I know everybody's really excited about the learning how to use their camera side of things, I thought I would bring that into it. Now that you know a few of the basic rules of how to set up your photo once you've got your camera, there's three main ways that your camera captures light. There's shutter speed, there's ISO, and there's aperture. Those are the only three things you really ever need to deal with on your camera. There's a lot of other settings, but if you get those right, you're doing well. So shutter speed helps you capture movement. It helps you, if you've got a waterfall that's pouring down, if you extend the shutter speed, you can capture a lot more of the water and you can get that nice silky feel. And at the other side, if you make your shutter speed really, really short, you can capture instants of movement. So you can capture the footy player jumping up and catching the ball. You can capture moving cars and get them in that one spot. Those are all really important things to know how to do, but shutter speed isn't necessarily the first place you need to start. ISO is the sensitivity of your camera to light. It helps you in situations where the shutter speed and the aperture have to be set at a specific value. You can change the ISO and you can make the photo brighter or darker. It also introduces noise. You've probably seen it on camera phones. When you take photos at night, you get really, really grainy shots. That's introduced by ISO. And that's also something that beginners generally don't need to touch. I recommend generally leaving it on ISO 100 or whatever your camera wants it to be, and just leaving it there so you don't have to worry about that specific thing. The last piece is aperture. Aperture is the number that starts with an F, an F8, F22. I know F isn't a number, but the rest of it is. So aperture is where most people start, and that's where I recommend that you start when you're playing with your camera. So Dan very nicely brought his camera in because I forgot. So aperture is this A on this knob here. So most cameras, even the point and shoot variety, will have an aperture mode. It might be limited, but you'll at least have it. That mode will let you change essentially what is the blur in the photo. So if you have, say, a birthday party and a cupcake, and you want the cupcake to be in focus, and you want your daughter in the background really excited about the cupcake, but you want her to be blurry, you want it to be really artsy, that's where aperture comes in. So if you shoot that on, I forgot to switch slides. So this is aperture priority. So same as the cupcake example, this was a model. I focused on the tip of her finger. This is in focus. The rest of her obviously is not, but it makes for an interesting photo because if all of it was in focus, you wouldn't know where to look because her hand's there, her face is there. Whereas this photo, you've got a lot more definition of that is the goal of the photo, is the hand. So when you're taking photos on your camera currently, you probably just use basic green mode or whatever it is. If you swap over to aperture priority, you mainly just need to remember these things. So if you have a shallow depth of field, you'll get more blur. You'll get the 1 bit in focus, and you'll get blur in the foreground and the background. If you have a deep depth of field, you will have more in focus. So if you've got a really wide landscape, you want to have a deep depth of field, so you can have the stuff in the foreground in focus and the stuff in the background in focus, because as arty as it seems sometimes, you get back to the computer and you go, that grass in the front that's blurry, that drives me nuts. So by shallow depth of field, I mean a small number. So your lens will have, your lens will have a marking on it that will tell you what the aperture is. If you switch to aperture priority, you can then change that. So everything else stays the same, the camera handles everything else, and it adjusts for you. But you can say, okay, I want the aperture to be f5.6, and then you can focus and take your photo. At the beginning, it's very much just playing around. You just play around and say, okay, 5.6, what sort of depth of field will that give me? So if you want that to get that blur effect, I reckon staying below f8. Whereas the deep depth of field, you want to stay f11 to f22. And that will give you a lot more depth into your scene. So, as I said, the camera handles everything else. It goes, okay, your aperture is f5.6, so I need to modify these other things to make sure that your photo doesn't come out white, or it doesn't come out completely dark. But it's at least giving you a bit of control over parts of the camera so you can start to learn about how different scenes work. And then from there, you can continue on or you can stay there and just have a bit of control over your camera and be happy with it. So I use this photo in this slide because this one is a lot more complex to do rather than just setting it up and shooting. It's got the long exposure on the water during the middle of the day. But you can work yourself up to this, but don't go for that all at once. You need to go for something easy, learn, take baby steps, get out of that Milford Sound shot, and continue on your way.
Nice one.
Okay.
That was awesome.
Not too over your heads. Explain it reasonably well.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Very clear. Yeah.
Cool.
So a question before, but I forgot what it was.
That camera have a high aperture.
So yeah, the aperture on that one would have been probably 11 or 16. Usually to get this sort of shot in the middle of the day, if you didn't have a filter on your camera, you would have to have the highest possible aperture because you're trying to get rid of as much light as possible. The easiest way to do this is I've got a piece of black glass that I put on the front of my camera, and it blocks out enough light that I can do like 2-second shots in the middle of the day. So, but yeah.
Otherwise it goes white.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if I tried to do 2-second shot during the middle of the day, even with all my other settings cranked down to block out as much light as possible, I would still end up with a white photo because there's just too much light. Especially in New Zealand, it's just too bright. So
Is that like a UV filter?
it's called a neutral density filter. So yeah, it's the UV filter is a clear piece of glass. This one I can bring it in. I just totally blanked and rode my bike and forgot to bring anything in. It's actually black. Like you put it on the camera and you can't focus anymore. So you have to focus before you put it on and then screw it on because the camera can't actually see anything. So it's like shooting into night. So yeah, I don't recommend putting them on and taking them off while your camera's on a tripod because you might drop them and smash them. Not that I've done that. So yeah, so hopefully that helps.
That's awesome. So I'm going to try heaps of those things now.
Cool.
Yeah, like the rule of thirds. Every time I look at a photo now, I'm going to be like, damn you, like your mum.
Yeah.
Damn you, Kristin, you've wrecked photos forever.
That's pretty much what she said.
The only setting I have in my camera is flash on a rock.
And
Yeah.
Serpa.
You can download other apps on the iPhone that let you adjust the aperture and stuff, but it's a bit more difficult on the iPhone to get results that you want. So
You can use Instagram filters.
you can use Instagram filters.
So do you crop most of your photos? Do you like take that photo and it's like twice as big, and then you go, yeah, I'm gonna cut the side off. It was a bit silly, and then cut that side off, and then make it a rule of third. Like I mean, that initial one with the tree.
Yeah.
The tree and the landscape at the back. That was rule of third. But I mean, if you go back to that one, was it like? Was it the next one? Is that the initial photo, and you're like, I'm gonna crop it?
No, so like this one actually, that has more sky on it. This one I actually had to crop sky off of it to make it, like this one I did crop down here.
Yeah.
So this was slightly further up, it was about there, but this one I had to crop sky off to try to give an example of, and then that one I think was actually out of the camera. But that one wasn't cropped at all. That was pretty much straight off camera.
The same thing.
Red Cliff. Near the guy in the shipwreck. And yeah, the moon came up and it was like brilliant red, and those are actually all stars. That one, there was a little bit extra on the bottom. So I do crop some of them, but I don't tend to put a horizon in the middle unless I'm doing like a perfect reflection of something, and I want to go for the horizon in the middle.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I get it off center, but then sometimes I look at it later and go, okay, that wasn't quite right.
So how do you take photos of stars? Because those stars are moving, obviously.
Yeah, so this shot, you can take photos up to 30 seconds and the stars won't move.
Is it
After
the stars moving or is it the camera?
that's the stars moving. So this was
Does
probably.
that look like your photos?
Yeah.
Normally take a photo.
Yeah.
Like that was terrible.
So this was probably, I'd say, a minute, judging by how long the stars are.
Wow.
But yeah, so with stars, there's very specific settings where if you want to take a shot of the Milky Way, it tends to be f2.8, so the shallowest depth of field possible, but it also gives you the most light in the camera. ISO 3200, which adds a whole bunch of noise, and 30 seconds. And that tends to give you a good shot. If you want shots like these, you just have a really long shutter speed and a cable release, where you can actually lock the shutter open and walk away and go have a beer and stuff, and then come back and unlock it and take your next photo.
Oh, so you'll unlock it for like 10 minutes and then it'll work.
Yeah, so if I can show you a photo, yeah, I wouldn't, yeah, I don't think I have it on this computer. It's 45 minutes, and it's almost like a perfect circle, because if you aim directly south, you can get a circle of stars.
Yeah.
So, because they all rotate around roughly near the Southern Cross. So,
99% of my photos are of babies. Any tips for taking photos of people?
So for people, you want to make sure that you always focus on the eye, both if possible, but you definitely want at least one eye to be pin sharp, because people are always going to look at the eyes. And also the rule of thirds definitely works with people shots too. If you can get, say, have a photo and have a baby on this side and have them looking into the photo, that works pretty well. But also if you put one of the eyes on one of the, if you divide it up and you put one of the eyes here, then that creates quite a good image as well.
So you always take the person off center. So when you take a photo, if I'm taking a photo, you
So if you're taking a photo of me, it depends what else, but it would probably still look better if I was off to the side, but you also want to take a photo of me sideways. Never take photos of people straight on because they hate it, because it just makes you look wider. This is much better, kind of not like angry shoulders, but just have one shoulder out, and yeah, it just creates a much better image that they're much more likely to be happy with.
Hard to get a kid to do that though.
It is.
You've
yeah.
got to move.
Kids are generally less concerned about whether they look chubby. So.